You can't be driven if you don't know where you're going. Think about that for a moment. Drive is often celebrated as the fuel of success. We glorify hustle, we glorify ambition, we glorify those who work late into the night. But if you don't know what road you're on, all that fuel, all that drive, all that energy becomes nothing more than spinning wheels. Imagine filling up a car with the finest fuel available, revving the engine, stepping on the accelerator, and realizing you have no idea which way you're supposed to go. You're not moving toward anything. You're just moving, and movement without direction is not progress. It's just exhaustion disguised as effort. Many people live their lives this way. They are incredibly hardworking, but when you ask them why they're working so hard, the answer is vague. They'll say, I just want to be successful, or I want to make more money, or want to be the best. But the question is, successful at what? More money for what? The best at what? Without a clear destination, drive becomes dangerous. It can take you anywhere, but often it takes you nowhere meaningful. The reason direction matters is because clarity creates focus. When you know where you're going, even if you don't have every step figured out, you suddenly have a filter for decision making. Every opportunity, every distraction, every shiny new thing can be measured against a simple question: does this get me closer to where I want to go? If the answer is no, you move on. If the answer is yes, you lean in. That kind of clarity transforms not only how you work, but also why you work. Think about the people who inspire us most. They don't just work hard, they work with purpose. They know why they're on the journey, and they know where they're heading. That's why they can say no to things that look appealing in the short term, but don't fit into the bigger vision. They are not just busy. They are intentional. There's a huge difference between motion and direction, and that difference is purpose. Here's a story. A friend of mine once told me about her early years in business. She worked 12-hour days, weekends, holidays, nonstop. She believed that the harder she worked, the faster she would succeed, and for a while she did see results. The money came in, the accolades came in. But eventually she hit a wall. She realized she had climbed a ladder only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. She had built something, yes, but it wasn't what she actually wanted. Her drive was real, but her destination was unclear. And when she finally took a step back and asked herself where she really wanted to go, the work shifted. She stopped working harder and started working smarter, aligning her effort with a vision. That's when she found not only success, but fulfillment. And that's the lesson. Without a clear direction, drive is wasted energy. The human spirit is capable of incredible persistence, but persistence without a destination feels like running on a treadmill. You sweat, you strain, you push, but at the end of the day, you're in the same place. We confuse activity with progress, but they are not the same. So what gives us direction? It's not just setting goals. Goals are milestones, but they are not the destination. You can set a goal to make a certain amount of money, but if you don't know what that money is for, the number is meaningless. You can set a goal to run a marathon, but if you don't know why you want to run it, the race becomes punishment instead of achievement. Direction comes from clarity of purpose. It comes from understanding not just what you want, but why you want it. Why is so powerful. When you know why, the how becomes much easier to figure out. When you know why, the obstacles feel smaller because you see them in the context of the destination. Without why, every obstacle feels like a reason to stop. With why, obstacles are just part of the process. Purpose fuels perseverance. Now let's talk about distractions. Distractions are not always bad things. Sometimes they come dressed as opportunities. Without direction, every new idea, every new job offer, every new path looks appealing. You start chasing everything and finishing nothing. But when you know where you're going, distractions lose their power. They might still tempt you, but you'll recognize that they don't fit the journey. Clarity gives you the courage to say no. And saying no is one of the most powerful things you can do when you know where you're going. Here's the irony: most people are afraid of slowing down to think about direction. They believe stopping to reflect is a waste of time. But what they don't realize is that without that pause, they may spend years moving fast in the wrong direction. A few hours of clarity can save years of wasted drive. The pause to think is not weakness, it's wisdom. And let's not forget alignment. Alignment is the bridge between purpose and drive. It's not just about working hard, it's about working in a way that aligns with your values, your goals, and your vision of the future. Too many people think burnout comes from working too much. But burnout really comes from working in ways that don't align with where you want to go. When you're aligned, even hard work feels meaningful. When you're misaligned, even small tasks feel heavy. Drive without alignment is like paddling hard while your boat is tied to the dock. You can put in all the effort you want, but you're not going anywhere. Alignment releases the boat. It lets your effort actually translate into movement toward the destination. And finally, let's talk about legacy. Drive often gets confused with speed. People think if they're driven, they need to move fast. But speed without direction is just chaos. True drive is not about how quickly you move, but about whether the direction you've chosen leads to something meaningful. The question is not how fast am I going? The question is what will be left behind when I arrive? People who are driven by clarity don't just chase success. They build significance. They're not motivated by being the first or the fastest. They're motivated by creating something that lasts. That's the difference between ambition for recognition and ambition for impact. Recognition fades, but impact endures. So let me ask you this, do you know where you're going? Not what you're doing right now, not what's on your to-do list, but where you're going. If someone asked you to articulate your destination in one clear sentence, could you do it? Because if you can't, then your drive, no matter how strong, is unfocused. It's like a beam of light scattered across a wall instead of concentrated into a laser. The energy is the same, but the results are very different. The good news is, it's never too late to pause and clarify. You don't need to have every detail figured out, but you need to know enough to give your drive direction. Ask yourself, what do I want to create? Who do I want to impact? What do I want to leave behind? Those questions lead to clarity, and clarity leads to meaningful drive. And once you know everything changes, you stop comparing yourself to others because their direction isn't yours. You stop chasing everything because not everything fits. You stop burning out because your energy is fueling something that matters to you. You start living with intention. You start moving with purpose. And you realize that being driven isn't about speed or intensity, it's about direction. You can't be driven if you don't know where you're going. But once you do know, once the destination is clear, your drive becomes unstoppable. Because then every step, every struggle, every sacrifice is not wasted, it's invested. And that is the difference between a life of business and a life of meaning. So, reflect. Decide where you're going, and then drive with everything you've got. Because when clarity meets drive, the world cannot ignore the impact you'll create. People often talk about motivation as if it's something you can just generate on command. We think motivation comes from discipline, from hard work, from pushing ourselves, and yes, discipline matters, hard work matters. But discipline without purpose is unsustainable. Hard work without meaning becomes misery. You can only force yourself for so long. You can only grind for so long. But when you are driven by purpose, something shifts. It's no longer about forcing yourself to keep going. It's about wanting to keep going because what you're working toward actually matters. Purpose is the most renewable source of energy a human being can have. When you have it, you don't burn out the same way. You may get tired, yes, but you don't quit because purpose makes the struggle worth it. Without purpose, every obstacle feels like a reason to stop. With purpose, every obstacle feels like proof that the journey is important. Think about history. Some of the greatest leaders, inventors, and changemakers weren't the most talented or the smartest. They were simply the most purposeful. Their why was so strong that it kept them going when logic said they should quit. They had something bigger than themselves that pulled them forward. It wasn't about ambition alone. It was about meaning. I remember a conversation I had with a young professional who was burning out. He was making great money, climbing the ladder fast, doing all the right things. But he told me, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. His motivation was slipping because his only fuel was external promotions, recognition, validation. Those things are powerful, but they're temporary. They can give you a short-term push, but they cannot sustain you. When those rewards slow down or disappear, motivation vanishes with them. Purpose, on the other hand, sustains you even when recognition doesn't come, even when results are slow, because purpose is not about the reward at the end. It's about the meaning along the way. There's a story of a man who worked on building cathedrals centuries ago. When asked what he was doing, one worker said, "I'm cutting stone." Another said, "I'm earning a wage." But a third worker looked up and said, "I'm building a house for God." The work was the same. The tools were the same. The sweat was the same, but the purpose transformed the meaning. One man saw labor, another saw money, the third saw legacy. Who do you think was most motivated? Who do you think endured the longest? That is the power of purpose. It changes not what you do, but how you feel about what you do. And here's the truth: purpose is not always grand. It doesn't always have to be saving the world or starting a movement. Purpose can be deeply personal. It can be about creating a better life for your family, building something you can be proud of, helping just one person improve their life. The size of the purpose doesn't matter. What matters is that it resonates with you, that it pulls you forward when everything else tells you to stop. Purpose is the antidote to distraction. Without it, you chase everything because everything looks appealing. But when you know why you're doing what you're doing, you gain clarity. You know what belongs on your plate and what doesn't. You know which opportunities align and which don't. Purpose is the compass that keeps you steady in a world full of noise. Let me ask you, have you ever noticed how some people seem tireless in their work? You look at them and think, how do they keep going? How do they keep showing up day after day? It's not because they're machines. It's because they're anchored in something deeper. They're not running on caffeine or adrenaline. They're running on meaning. That's what makes them resilient. That's what allows them to withstand failure, setbacks, and long stretches where progress feels invisible. I once met a teacher who had been in the classroom for nearly 30 years. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, she wasn't celebrated in magazines or on television. But every single day, she showed up with the same energy, the same passion, the same love for her students. I asked her once, "How do you keep going after all these years?" She smiled and said, "Because every child I teach could change the world. I may never see it, but I believe it." That's purpose. She wasn't motivated by salary or recognition. She was motivated by the possibility of impact. And because of that, her energy never ran dry. Purpose transforms even the most mundane tasks into something valuable. Think about parents. Waking up in the middle of the night to care for a crying baby is exhausting. But they do it anyway, not because it's convenient, but because the purpose, the love for their child, makes the sacrifice meaningful. Purpose is what allows people to endure pain, discomfort, and sacrifice without resentment. Because the why is always bigger than the cost. Now, let's talk about organizations. Companies that thrive long-term are not the ones who simply chase profit. Profit is necessary, of course, but profit alone is not a purpose. The companies that inspire loyalty in their people and their customers are those that stand for something bigger than numbers. When people feel that they are part of a mission, not just a business, they give more of themselves. They stay motivated not because they have to, but because they want to. Purpose is what transforms employees into believers and customers into advocates. And yet, many people avoid asking themselves the hard question, why am I doing this? We get so caught up in the business of life that we forget to step back and reflect. We confuse activity with meaning. We chase external validation instead of internal clarity. But the cost of avoiding that question is burnout, emptiness, and regret. Because one day, you'll look back and realize you worked hard but never asked if the work was worth it. The thing about purpose is that it requires honesty. You can't fake it. You can't manufacture it out of thin air. You have to dig deep and ask yourself what truly matters to you. And that's uncomfortable because the answers may not align with what the world tells you to value. The world may tell you to chase money, status, but your purpose might be to create art, to raise a family, to serve a community. And choosing that path might look smaller to others. But it's not smaller. If it gives your life meaning, if it fuels your motivation, it is the biggest path you could possibly take. Purpose also evolves. What drives you at 20 might not drive you at 40. That's okay. Purpose is not fixed. It grows as you grow. The key is to stay connected to it, to keep asking the question, why am I doing this? Because the moment your purpose and your actions drift apart, your motivation will begin to fade. Alignment between the two is essential, and here's the beauty: when your purpose is clear, you don't need to be pushed, you're pulled. You don't wake up thinking, I have to. You wake up thinking, I get to. That shift changes everything. It changes how you see your work, how you treat challenges, how you show up for others. Motivation that comes from purpose is not fragile. It is resilient. Think of the people who inspired you in your own life. A teacher, a mentor, a leader, maybe even a family member. What made them stand out? Was it their talent, their intelligence, or was it their sense of purpose that made them unshakable? Purpose is magnetic. It draws people in. It inspires trust. It gives people permission to believe in something bigger than themselves. You can't fake drive for long. You can't sustain motivation on willpower alone. At some point, you need something deeper, and that deeper thing is purpose. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be eloquent, but it has to be real. So ask yourself, what's my purpose? What am I working for that's bigger than the paycheck, bigger than the applause, bigger than me? Because when you know that answer, your drive becomes unstoppable. When you know that answer, setbacks don't derail you. Failures don't define you. Discomfort doesn't scare you. Because you're not running on empty. You're running on meaning. Purpose fuels motivation. It is the anchor in the storm, the compass in the confusion, the fire when everything else goes cold. And if you can find it, nurture it, and live by it, you will discover a level of drive you didn't know you had. Not the kind of drive that burns you out, but the kind of drive that keeps you going year after year, decade after decade. Because purpose doesn't just fuel motivation. Purpose fuels life. We live in a world that is louder than ever before. Every second, something is trying to grab our attention. Notifications, emails, opportunities, headlines, voices, expectations, all of them pulling at us, demanding that we look their way, and it feels endless. The truth is, distractions have always existed, but today they don't just compete for our time, they compete for our very sense of direction. And here's the danger: if you don't have clarity about where you're going, distractions don't look like distractions at all. They look like opportunities. That's the paradox. Distractions are not always bad things. In fact, they're often good things disguised in appealing packaging, pulling us off course little by little. And the problem isn't that we don't notice them. The problem is that without a clear destination, we don't know how to tell the difference between what's important and what's just noise. A distraction only becomes obvious when you know what you're moving toward. Imagine being in the middle of the ocean on a boat without a compass. Every wave looks like a new path. Every gust of wind feels like a new direction. You end up moving constantly but arriving nowhere. That's what happens when we let distractions dictate our choices. Without a clear destination, you can spend years working hard, hustling, even succeeding in the eyes of others, and still feel lost. Because you were moving, yes, but not moving towards something that mattered to you. One of the most dangerous sentences you'll ever hear is, "It's a good opportunity." Good opportunities are everywhere. But the question is, does this opportunity align with my destination? If it doesn't, then it's not an opportunity, it's a distraction. And yet, so many people live their lives chasing every good-looking path, only to realize years later that they never asked themselves whether those paths connected to where they wanted to go. I once met a man who had built 3 different businesses. He was incredibly hardworking, constantly busy, always on the move. But when I asked him what his vision was, what his ultimate destination looked like, he couldn't answer. He admitted that he was chasing every new trend, every new next big thing. His energy wasn't the problem. His lack of clarity was. Without a destination, he couldn't tell if he was on track or not. Every new distraction became a detour. And after years of grinding, he realized he had been running in circles. That's the trap so many of us fall into. We think saying yes to everything is the way to grow. We think being busy equals being productive. But business without destination is chaos. It feels urgent. It feels important. But in reality, it's hollow. True progress doesn't come from saying yes to everything. It comes from saying no to most things, so you can say yes to the few things that actually matter. Distractions are powerful because they are sneaky. They don't usually come as obvious time wasters. They come dressed as productivity. They show up as another project, another meeting, another role, another side hustle. And the more talented you are, the more dangerous it becomes, because the world will keep offering you more and more things to do. Talent without direction is a magnet for distractions. But purpose and destination, that's the filter. That's what allows you to separate the noise from the necessary. Think of the archer aiming at a target. Without the target, the arrow is just motion. With the target, every muscle, every breath, every ounce of focus is aligned toward hitting that point. That's what a clear destination does. It turns distraction into irrelevance. The target makes the choice for you. Let me share a story. There was a woman who dreamed of becoming a writer. But along the way, she kept taking jobs that paid well but pulled her away from her writing. She justified it by saying, "I'll come back to writing later. Right now, this is a good opportunity." Years passed. Promotions came, responsibilities grew, and before she knew it, writing had been pushed so far aside that it was only a faint memory. She wasn't lazy, she wasn't unmotivated. She was simply distracted by opportunities that didn't connect to her destination. And the tragedy is those opportunities weren't bad, they just weren't hers. That's the critical distinction. Distractions are not always wrong, they're just wrong for you. And if you don't know your destination, you won't know the difference. Think about the companies that have stood the test of time. They didn't say yes to every market, every trend, every new shiny product. They had clarity of vision. They knew their destination, so they could say no to distractions that didn't fit. The companies that lose their way are the ones that try to chase everything at once. They confuse motion with progress, and eventually their identity dissolves. The same is true for people. If you try to chase everything, you end up being known for nothing. And here's something we often forget: every yes is also a no. Every time you say yes to a distraction, you're saying no to your destination. The cost of distraction is not just time, it's direction. The hours you spend on something unaligned are hours you can't invest in what actually matters. Over time, that cost compounds. And one day, you wake up and wonder how you got so far from where you wanted to be. The solution is not to eliminate distractions completely. You can't. The world will always be noisy. The solution is to strengthen your clarity so that distractions lose their power. When your destination is clear, distractions stop looking attractive. They become obvious detours you simply don't take. Let me ask you, how many times have you started something full of energy and excitement only to abandon it midway when something else caught your attention? How many times have you shifted directions not because you finished one path, but because another one looked easier or faster? If you don't have clarity about your destination, every path looks equally tempting. But with clarity, you don't keep switching roads. You stay on the one that leads where you want to go, even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when it's slow. Distractions thrive in the absence of vision. Vision is the immune system against noise. And here's the thing: clarity is not about having a perfectly detailed map. It's about having a North Star. It's about knowing what matters most so that when the world pulls at you, you can say, that's not for me. Without that North Star, you're at the mercy of every current, every wave, every storm. There's a reason so many successful people talk about the power of focus. Focus is not about shutting out the world. It's about having something so meaningful to move toward that the world no longer has the same pull. When your destination is meaningful enough, distractions don't disappear, but they lose their ability to derail you. Here's an image: imagine two runners on a track. One knows the finish line is just 400 meters away. The other doesn't know where the finish line is. Who do you think runs with more consistency, more confidence, more endurance? The one who knows where they're going. The one who doesn't know the finish line will keep slowing down, getting distracted, even stopping to look around. That's what life feels like when you don't know your destination. The tragedy of distraction is not just wasted time, it's wasted potential. Every one of us has something unique to offer. But when we allow distractions to scatter our energy, we dilute our impact. We become busy instead of effective. We confuse movement with meaning. So the question you must ask yourself is not, how do I avoid distractions? But what is my destination? Because once you know that, the distractions reveal themselves. Once you know where you're going, you don't need willpower to stay focused. You need clarity. You will never eliminate noise from your life. But you can decide what deserves your attention. You can decide where to place your energy. You can decide what matters most. And when you do, you will find that the world suddenly looks different. The noise is still there, but you're no longer pulled by it, because you have something bigger pulling you forward. Distractions or destination, that's the choice. If you don't choose the destination, distractions will choose for you. But when you do choose, when you commit to where you're going, then every step, every decision, every yes, and every no begins to align, and that's when your life stops being about business and starts being about purpose. So the next time something comes along and looks shiny, tempting, exciting, ask yourself, does this take me closer to my destination, or does it take me away? And if it takes you away, have the courage to say no, because the cost of distraction is far too high. You will always be surrounded by distractions. The question is whether you let them drive you or whether you choose to be driven by your destination. We live in a culture that celebrates effort. We applaud the person who works the longest hours, who sacrifices the most sleep, who takes the least vacation. We glorify hustle, we glorify grind, we glorify exhaustion as if tiredness is a badge of honor. But here's the truth that too few people talk about. Effort alone is not enough. Working harder does not guarantee you're moving in the right direction. Effort without alignment is wasted energy. You can row harder and harder, but if your boat is pointed the wrong way, all you're doing is moving faster in the wrong direction. That's the mistake so many of us make. We confuse activity with progress. We tell ourselves that as long as we're busy, we must be achieving something. But business is not the same as purpose. Business is not the same as progress. You can spend years working hard only to wake up and realize you've climbed a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. The difference between burnout and fulfillment is not the number of hours you work. It's whether your work is aligned with your values, your vision, your destination. Hard work in alignment feels energizing, even when it's difficult. Hard work out of alignment drains you, even when it's easy. Alignment is the multiplier of effort. Without it, you're running on empty. With it, even the heaviest load feels worth carrying. I once met a man who had built a successful career in finance. He was making more money than he ever dreamed of. By all external measures, he had made it. But every time he talked about his work, his face went flat. His eyes looked heavy. He said, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I should be happy. I've worked so hard to get here, but it just doesn't feel right." That's the problem of effort without alignment. It doesn't matter how successful you look from the outside. If it's not aligned on the inside, the success feels hollow. Contrast that with another person I met, a woman who ran a small bakery. She wasn't rich. She didn't have fancy accolades. But when she spoke about her work, her entire being lit up. She talked about creating joy in people's mornings, about serving the community, about the pride she felt watching children grow up coming to her bakery. She worked just as hard, maybe harder, but her effort was aligned with her values. That alignment gave her energy, while the man in finance, despite his wealth, was exhausted. The difference wasn't effort, it was alignment. When you are aligned, your work stops feeling like a constant uphill climb. You still struggle, you still face challenges. But the struggle feels meaningful. You can endure more because you know why it matters. That's the hidden power of alignment. It transforms effort from draining into sustaining. Think about athletes. The ones who perform at the highest levels don't just train harder than everyone else. They train smarter. They align their effort with their goal. A sprinter doesn't practice like a marathon runner. A swimmer doesn't train like a weightlifter. The alignment between the training and the desired outcome is what makes the effort effective. In the same way, our lives are not just about working hard, but about ensuring our effort is aligned with the life we want to build. Effort without alignment leads to burnout. And burnout is not the result of doing too much. It's the result of doing too much of the wrong thing. When your daily actions drift away from your deeper values, your energy leaks out, you feel tired not because you've worked too hard, because you've worked against yourself. Alignment seals that leak. It channels your energy in a direction that feels right, and suddenly the work fuels you instead of draining you. The problem is that most people never stop to ask themselves the questions that create alignment. What do I actually want? What do I value most? What kind of impact do I want to leave behind? Instead, they chase what everyone else is chasing. They run after money, recognition, promotions, or status because that's what the world tells them to value. And even when they achieve those things, they feel an emptiness inside because alignment cannot be borrowed from someone else. It must come from within. One of the hardest things you'll ever do is say no to something that looks impressive but doesn't align. It takes courage to turn down the promotion that doesn't fit your values. It takes courage to step off the path that everyone else says is the smart move. But every yes that is out of alignment is a no to the life you actually want. Every misaligned decision takes you further away from yourself. There's an old story about a stonemason. He worked day after day, chiseling blocks of stone. When asked why he did it, he could have said, "Because it's my job." But instead, he said, "I am building a cathedral." That's alignment. He wasn't just cutting stone. He was contributing to something that mattered to him. The effort was the same, but the meaning was entirely different. Think about organizations. Companies love to push for effort. They celebrate hustle. They demand productivity. But the organizations that thrive in the long run are not the ones that squeeze the most hours out of their employees. They are the ones that align their people's work with a clear mission, a shared purpose, a vision that resonates. In those companies, people don't just work harder, they work better. Because effort alone produces compliance, alignment produces commitment. Compliance is temporary. Commitment is lasting. Alignment also brings clarity to decision making. When you are aligned, choices become easier. You don't waste time overanalyzing every opportunity. You know what belongs and what doesn't. Effort without alignment creates noise. Your energy is scattered, your focus diluted. But alignment creates focus. Your energy is concentrated, your impact magnified. Here's the paradox. Alignment often requires slowing down before you speed up. Most people don't like to pause because they believe stopping means falling behind. But pausing to reflect, to realign, to ask yourself if the path you're on is the right one, that is not wasted time. That is the most valuable time you can spend. Because an hour of alignment is worth more than a year of misdirected effort. I remember working with a leader who had been pushing his team relentlessly. They were exhausted, turnover was high, and yet results weren't improving. I asked him, "What are you trying to achieve?" He gave me a vague answer about growth and success. But when we dug deeper, he realized that his vision wasn't clear. His team was working hard, but they weren't aligned. Once he clarified the vision and aligned his team's effort toward a common goal, everything changed. They didn't work harder, they worked better. And the results came not from extra hours, but from aligned action. The world will always reward effort in the short term. You can hustle your way to quick wins, but sustainability comes only through alignment, because when effort fades, alignment sustains. When willpower runs out, alignment keeps you going. Willpower pushes you, alignment pulls you, and being pulled by something bigger than yourself is infinitely more powerful than pushing yourself endlessly without meaning. So how do you know if you're aligned? Pay attention to how you feel at the end of the day. Do you feel drained or do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel like you spent your energy or invested it? The body doesn't lie. Misalignment feels heavy. Alignment feels lighter even when the work is hard. It's not about eliminating effort. It's about making sure your effort counts. The greatest tragedy is not working hard and failing. The greatest tragedy is working hard and succeeding at something that doesn't matter to you. That is success without fulfillment. That is the ultimate misalignment. So the question is not, am I working hard enough? The real question is, am I working on the right things? Am I aligned with my values, my vision, my destination? Because the person who is aligned will always outlast the person who is simply pushing harder. Alignment beats effort. Alignment transforms effort. Alignment multiplies effort. We need to stop glorifying exhaustion and start celebrating alignment. Stop asking, how hard am I working? And start asking, am I working on what matters most? Because when effort and alignment meet, something remarkable happens. Your work becomes more than just labor. It becomes meaningful. It becomes sustainable. It becomes legacy. At the end of your life, no one will care how many hours you worked. They will care what those hours produced. They will care about the lives you touched, the impact you created, the meaning you left behind. And that will not come from effort alone. It will come from alignment. So yes, work hard. Push yourself. Be disciplined. But more importantly, make sure your effort is aligned with your destination, because effort without alignment is wasted. Effort with alignment is unstoppable. We live in a time where speed is everything. The faster we grow, the faster we scale, the faster we succeed, the more impressive we look. We measure startups by how quickly they reach $1 billion valuation. We measure careers by how fast someone climbs the ladder. We measure people by how quickly they achieve results. But the obsession with speed blinds us to something far more important. Legacy. Legacy is not about how fast you reach a destination. It's about what remains long after you're gone. Speed is about winning today. Legacy is about mattering tomorrow. Speed fades, but legacy endures. The tragedy of our culture is that we reward those who run fast, but we rarely stop to ask, did they build something worth lasting? I once spoke with a young entrepreneur who had grown his company at lightning speed. Investors were thrilled. The headlines were glowing. But behind the scenes, his team was exhausted. The culture was toxic. Customers were treated as transactions, not relationships. He said, "We're moving fast, but I don't know if we're building something that will last." That's the danger of speed without legacy. You can sprint your way into visibility, but you can't sprint your way into significance. On the other hand, I once visited a family business that had been running for 3 generations. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't on the front page of any magazine. But the people who worked there were deeply loyal. Customers trusted them like family. The founder, now long gone, had left behind something greater than a company. He had left behind trust, reputation, and impact. He had built a legacy. His speed didn't matter anymore. His legacy did. That's the difference. Speed is about ego. Legacy is about service. Speed is about being first. Legacy is about being remembered. Speed is about what you can get. Legacy is about what you leave behind. And when you really think about it, which one matters more? The people we admire most in history are not the ones who achieve things quickly. They are the ones whose impact lasted. We don't celebrate Abraham Lincoln because he rose to power fast. We celebrate him because his leadership reshaped a nation. We don't celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. because he gained followers quickly. We celebrate him because his dream still inspires generations. We don't celebrate innovators because they launch products fast. We celebrate them because their ideas change the way humanity lives. Speed alone is fragile. If all you have is speed, the moment you stop running, everything falls apart. But if you build with legacy in mind, even when you're gone, your work continues to speak for you. Legacy is not measured in weeks or years. It is measured in decades, sometimes centuries. That's the real prize. The danger of prioritizing speed is that it tempts us into shortcuts. We cut corners, we compromise values, we sacrifice relationships, all in the name of moving faster. But shortcuts rarely lead to lasting destinations. They may get you there sooner, but they rob you of the foundation you need to endure once you arrive. Legacy requires patience. Legacy requires consistency. Legacy requires the discipline to say, I am not just building for now, I am building for what comes after me. I often tell leaders speed is a race, but legacy is a relay. In a race, it's all about how fast you can go. In a relay, it's about how well you pass the baton. You don't have to finish everything in your lifetime. You just have to ensure that what you've built can be carried forward by others. That's the essence of legacy. Think of the oak tree. It doesn't grow overnight. It doesn't rush to be tall. It takes years, decades even, to stretch its roots deep into the soil, to strengthen its trunk, to spread its branches. But once it's grown, it can weather storms that would destroy weaker trees. And even long after it falls, it leaves behind fertile soil for new growth. That's what legacy looks like. It's not the fastest to grow, but it's the strongest to endure. The irony is that when you focus on legacy, speed often comes as a byproduct. Because when people believe in what you stand for, when they feel your vision is bigger than immediate results, they give their best. They become committed, not just compliant. And commitment creates momentum. But when you focus only on speed, you burn through people, you burn through trust, and eventually you burn out. There's a reason why so many fast-growing companies collapse just as quickly as they rise. They were chasing speed without laying the foundation of legacy. They wanted to win headlines, not hearts. They wanted to impress the world, not impact it. And the world forgets them as quickly as it celebrated them. The same is true for our personal lives. We want quick wins, quick recognition, quick success, quick gratification. But when we look back, the moments that matter are never the quick ones. They are the lasting ones. It's not how fast you said, I love you, but how consistently you lived it. It's not how fast you achieved your career goals, but whether you made a difference in people's lives along the way. Legacy is the footprint of your values left in the lives of others. The real measure of success is not what you accomplish in your lifetime. It's what continues because of you after your lifetime. If everything stops when you stop, then all you had was speed. But if the work carries on, if the vision continues, if people are still inspired long after you're gone, then you've built a legacy. We need to shift the questions we ask ourselves. Instead of asking, how fast can I get there? We should ask, what will remain when I'm gone? Instead of asking, how quickly can I achieve this goal? We should ask, will this goal still matter 50 years from now? Legacy shifts our perspective from urgency to importance, from short-term gains to long-term meaning. It takes courage to slow down in a world obsessed with speed. It takes courage to say, I don't want to be the fastest. I want to be the most enduring. Because people will pressure you to go faster, to grow quicker, to deliver results now. But the leaders who choose legacy over speed know that the real results are not measured by how quickly they arrive, but by how deeply they last. One of the most inspiring conversations I ever had was with a teacher. She said, I will never be rich. I will never be famous. But every day I walk into a classroom and I pour myself into these students. And maybe 20 years from now, one of them will do something great. And if I was even a small part of that, then I've left my legacy. That's the power of legacy. It doesn't always come with recognition. It doesn't always come with applause, but it ripples through generations in ways you may never see. And that's the humbling part about legacy. You don't control when or how it shows up. You don't get to measure it on a quarterly report. Sometimes you never even see it. But it is there woven into the lives of the people you've influenced, the culture you've shaped, the values you've passed on. Speed gives you visibility. Legacy gives you immortality. When you focus only on speed, your question is, how fast can I reach my goal? When you focus on legacy, your question is, how meaningful can my impact be? And those are two very different lives. So, as you think about the path you are on, ask yourself, am I building something that will outlast me? Am I living in a way that will be remembered not just for what I achieved, but for what I gave? Because at the end of our lives, no one will care how fast we were. They will care how we made them feel, how we helped them grow, how we left the world a little better than we found it. Speed is temporary, legacy is eternal. Choose wisely.